Okay, so bankruptcy, right? It's always seen as like this big scary thing.
Yeah.
But we're diving into the nitty-gritty today.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the hidden stuff, the strategies that make it way more interesting than I think anybody would think.
Yeah, it's true. We're going to be digging into some really interesting research today, looking at it through this lens of game theory.
Yeah, and we've got academic papers, like a whole stack of them.
Yeah.
And they're about all kinds of different things, from how different bankruptcy rules play out in the real world to the power of who makes the first move in these like really high-stakes negotiations.
Right.
But there's this one that really blew my mind.
Oh, yeah.
And it's all about using, get this, evolutionary game theory
Okay.
to come up with a whole new system that could be fairer.
Yeah, so before we go too far down that road, maybe let's take a step back and just define, like, what is game theory?
Yeah, good idea.
At its simplest, it's about how we make decisions when there's something at stake, right?
Yeah.
Especially when resources might be limited.
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out the best way to come out ahead.
Yeah, like a game of chess, but instead of rooks and pawns, we're talking about millions of dollars.
Right, exactly.
People's livelihoods.
Exactly, and the rules of the game matter.
Yeah.
Like the actual bankruptcy laws, how those are written has a huge impact on how everything plays out.
Yeah, for sure, because that determines who gets what. Okay, so let's talk about some of these rules.
Okay.
So we've got things like the proportional rule,
Right.
constrained equal awards rule. There's a lot of different rules.
There are a lot of rules, but it's not as complicated as it sounds.
Okay.
So the proportional rule, think of it like splitting up a pizza based on how much everybody paid, right?
Okay.
If you paid for half, you get half.
Okay.
The constrained equal awards rule, it tries to make things a little bit more fair for the people who maybe didn't chip in as much.
Okay.
And then you've got the constrained equal losses rule.
Mm.
That one, instead of who gets the biggest slice, it's about minimizing everybody's losses as evenly as possible.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, each one of these kind of creates a different playing field for the people involved.
Yeah.
Whether we're talking about the company itself, the creditors, investors, employees even.
Well, you know what's making me think about that, the big retail chain that went bankrupt recently?
Right.
I remember following that in the news, and it just seemed like there was this whole strategic game
Yeah.
going on that nobody was talking about
Yeah.
beyond the financial statements.
It's true. I mean, and that's really what game theory allows us to do. It allows us to kind of peek behind the curtain a little bit and see that. I mean, you're right. We often think about this as kind of just a sad, inevitable thing, right?
Yeah.
But there are a lot of decisions being made along the way, strategic decisions being made.
Yeah.
And the outcome depends not just on, the numbers, but also how people are acting and reacting to each other.
So you're saying that if you understand game theory, you could actually have an advantage.
Absolutely. I mean, it can help us anticipate moves, maybe understand other people's motivations better,
Yeah.
even make better decisions ourselves.
Okay, so let's dig into this a little bit more. Okay, our first source is a paper called A Non-Cooperative Approach to Bankruptcy Problems.
Okay.
And they get into this idea of strategic decision-making.
Right?
And they use a really interesting example.
Oh, yeah.
They say that sometimes it can be better to demand less in these bankruptcy negotiations.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait, hold on. So you're saying, like, you could actually get more if you ask for less.
Sometimes. Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right?
Yeah.
But that's the thing about game theory. It challenges all those assumptions
Okay.
that we tend to have.
Okay.
And it reveals some of these kind of unexpected strategies.
Interesting. So how does that work?
How does that work?
Yeah, how do you get more by asking for less?
So imagine, like, you're a small business owner, right? And you're in one of these negotiations. You're trying to, get what you can. You're owed money.
Right.
You might be tempted to just try to get every penny, right?
Yeah.
Fight for everything.
Seems intuitive.
It does seem intuitive, but game theory, sometimes it says it's better to actually accept a smaller settlement,
Okay.
but you do it strategically.
From like one person.
From one person. You accept a smaller settlement up front, and then that actually puts you in a better position.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Because then you can go to the other people and say, well, this person gave me this.
Exactly. Exactly. You get that deal done. You've got some cash flow.
Yeah.
You've got some leverage to go negotiate better terms with the other people you're negotiating with.
Interesting.
So it's really about thinking kind of a couple of steps ahead.
Yeah.
And trying to anticipate how the other people involved are going to react to what you're doing.
Okay, so that kind of leads into, we were talking about before, the power of the first move.
Yeah, yeah.
Who gets to make the first offer in these situations?
Exactly. And that's what we see in that excerpt about negotiations is this idea of a first mover advantage.
Right.
And it really can be a huge advantage. It might not seem like a big deal,
Right.
but when you get to set the terms, when you get to frame the whole negotiation in your favor,
Yeah.
it's huge, puts you at a big advantage.
It's like in chess. You make that first move.
Yeah, exactly.
You're
That's
kind of
right.
controlling the board.
Yeah, you're not just moving a piece. You're saying, this is the game we're playing.
Right.
This is how it's going to go. You're dictating the strategy,
Yeah.
and everybody else is reacting to you. So let's imagine, right? We've got a company.
Okay.
They're in trouble. They owe money to a bank,
Okay.
but they also owe money to their employees.
Okay, so we're talking about like back wages or something.
Yeah, back wages. Maybe, they haven't paid.
Yeah.
They haven't paid into their pension in a while, whatever it might be.
Okay.
So you've got the banks. They want to get their loan repaid.
Makes sense.
And you've got employees. They want to make sure they're going to have a job.
Right.
They're going to, be able to pay their rent. Now, if the bank gets to make the first offer,
Okay.
they're probably going to say, we want our money and we want it now, right?
Yeah.
Which, leaves very little for anybody else.
Right. The employees are kind of out of luck.
Yeah, but imagine if the employees get to make the first offer.
Okay.
They're going to say, we need to keep our jobs.
Yeah.
We need to, keep the salary coming. And maybe the bank has to wait a little bit longer to get their loan repaid.
Interesting. So it's a totally different outcome potentially.
Totally different. And this is where it starts to get really interesting, right?
Okay.
Because you brought up earlier evolutionary game theory.
Yeah, that was the one that I was really interested in.
Right. And some researchers think this might be the key to coming up with a system that's actually fairer.
Oh, yeah, because I remember when we were talking about this before, it seemed a little complicated to me.
It is. It's a little out there. So traditional game theory,
All right.
We're thinking about one game,
Right.
one set of rules.
Yeah.
Evolutionary game theory, it's a much bigger picture. We're
Yeah.
not just playing the game once, we're playing it over and over and over again
Okay.
with different rules each time.
So you're saying it's like almost like survival of the fittest,
Yeah.
but for bankruptcy procedures.
Yeah, exactly. So the rules that work really well, that lead to kind of good outcomes, those are the rules that are going to stick around.
Okay.
The rules that lead to chaos and kind of bad outcomes for everybody, those would fade away.
Interesting. So how would that actually work?
How would we implement it?
Yeah, how do you get these different rules to compete like that?
Well, you could run simulations.
Okay.
You can model it out. You can say, okay, what happens if we have these rules? What happens if we tweak the rules a little bit? We can also look at what's happening in the real world.
Oh, interesting.
Different countries have slightly different bankruptcy laws.
Right, right.
So we can see which systems seem to be working well
Yeah.
and which ones seem to be leading to a lot of problems.
So we'd be looking at which rules end up, I don't know, being the most popular or something.
It's not so much about popularity. It's more like, do these rules actually help?
Right. Do they actually make things better for everybody?
Exactly. Do they lead to more stability,
Okay.
more agreement, fewer problems down the road?
Because, like, right now it feels like somebody always loses in bankruptcy, right?
Yeah.
It's like this fight for who can get the most out of a bad situation.
Yeah, you're right. And that's kind of what we're trying to move away from, right? With this idea of evolutionary game theory, can we design a system where instead of just trying to divide up the pie,
Yeah.
we make the pie bigger for everybody?
Yeah. It seems like that would be better for the economy as a whole, right?
Absolutely. I mean, if you've got a system where even if a company goes bankrupt, it doesn't have to be a complete disaster.
Right.
People can get back on their feet. That's better for everybody.
So are there problems with this approach?
Well, I mean, there are always challenges.
Yeah.
One of the big ones is, like, how do you define what a good outcome is?
Oh, that's a good point.
Right. Because what seems fair to one person
Right.
might seem totally unfair to somebody else.
Especially in bankruptcy where people are already, I don't know, stressed out.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of emotion involved.
Yeah.
Another challenge is just the practicality of it. Like, changing the rules of bankruptcy, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's not going to happen overnight.
Right, exactly. It's a huge undertaking.
Right.
But even if it's a long way off,
Yeah.
I think it's still a really valuable way to think about these issues.
Yeah, no, totally. To kind of, I don't know, shift our perspective.
Right, shift our perspective. Maybe we start asking some different questions, looking for different solutions.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of bankruptcy
Yeah.
and game theory, what are, like, the big takeaways?
Well, I think the biggest one is bankruptcy. It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It's people making decisions, often in really tough situations.
Yep.
And if you understand a little bit about how those decisions get made, the strategies involved, it gives you an advantage, right?
Oh.
Like we were talking about, making that first offer, for example.
Right.
That can completely change the game.
Yeah, no, totally. It's been a fascinating conversation.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, who knows what the future of bankruptcy looks like?
It's true.
But at least it's, I don't know, maybe a little less mysterious.
Yeah, a little less mysterious. And hopefully a little less scary.
That's what we like to hear.
Mm.
Okay, that's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.